Welcome. This is Venture Media in conversation with Nilaleg. I am Kirsty Watermeyer, and we're about to listen to the groundbreaking strides towards sustainable development that Namibia is making, as seen at the Integrated Landscape Management Conference. The Integrated Landscape Management Conference, the first of its kind, which happened in Windhoek in July 2024, provided a crucial platform for dialogue and collaboration amongst diverse stakeholders. From government bodies to research institutions and civil society organizations, participants gathered to address and strategize around land management practices. Sitting down in the studio after the conference, Dion Chikuza, youth advocate for sustainable development, explained the value of this conference.
First of all, the value is ethics and principles are being recognized, especially when you're talking about inclusivity, when you're talking about transparency, when you're talking about common and differentiated responsibilities, because we all have a responsibility towards the environment, according to Article 95L of the Namibia Constitution, which says the state, the society, the two of them would be responsible for ensuring our ecosystems are well taken care of for benefit of future generations, etc. But it doesn't necessarily say the state alone. It pushes for both the state and the society. So the value of such a conference speaks directly to that article to make sure that all stakeholders are fairly involved. And the other issue is the benefit is that you get to hear from different stakeholders that you don't regularly see because it's a project. So because it's a project, it doesn't get the benefit of always engaging people from different localities at any point of time. They rather are more focused on the projects, like focal landscapes. They'll be on the ground doing activities, so they can only speak to that particular community. But with a conference, they were expanded, and so many more people could come, and many new people actually learned about the Nilalek project. And I think that was the best part, because it's like you're reporting back to the people and telling them this is what we are, this is what we have done. And the fact that it spent out for at least 3 days gave people opportunity to choose which part of the project they want to be part of, because there's so many different components to the Nilalek project that one cannot really finish discussing it in 3 days. So I think also another benefit was maybe hearing from like the youth. A couple of us were quite happy to be there, because we rarely get such invitations. So I was with a group of young people whom I saw were very excited. Some were presenting. We were happy to see young people presenting their research as well, which is also a core component of the project. So I would like to think the project did pretty well to do that. If only that could become an annual thing, so that more Namibians can understand what are we doing actually in responding to climate issues and landscape management challenges.
The Integrated Landscape Management Conference really spotlighted the significant Nilalek project, a collaboration between Namibia's Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism and the United Nations Development Programme, funded by the Global Environmental Facility. The Nilalek project, or Namibia Integrated Landscape Approach for Enhancing Livelihoods and Environmental Governance to Eradicate Poverty, represents a bold initiative to revolutionize land management across key agricultural and forest landscapes in Namibia. This project is not just about managing land, it's about integrating poverty reduction with environmental sustainability in a way that resonates deeply with the challenges faced by Namibia. Tell us, Dion, about the panel that you were facilitating at this conference and the outcomes of the discussions.
In short, I was moderating a panel on the Namibian land use and climate change and how the two integrate, especially looking at the complexity of land management when you take into account biodiversity losses, climate change, and also the land degradation and desertification that we are experiencing. So my job was to moderate a very, I would say, excellent panel of speakers who have very strong backgrounds in the field, and I was supposed to let them share with the audience how do we adapt to the changes of climate change, how do we reduce biodiversity losses, what is the role of institutions, and what can we do with some of the processes, the role of research and science. So it was a very intimate, I'd like to think, conversation And it was brilliant to hear so many different thoughts, especially considering how these institutions are in so different places in terms of practicality every day. But on that particular panel, we managed to get all of them there together, and it was interesting to hear how institutionally the perspectives differ. So that was, for me, one of the best panel sessions at the conference. And I saw from the crowd that they were very intrigued to listen. So there were a couple of takeaway points. The first one was to move from research for publication purposes towards research for implementation, to ensure that institutions are not just excited about saying, I've got how many PhD researches that have been conducted, but rather to say, how has your research become applicable within the community of practice where people need these solutions? And this is one of the biggest elements that the panel was arguing, that we have so much knowledge that's just sitting on the shelves, and a lot of it is not translated into actionable solutions, especially for local communities who are conducted in terms of, they're engaged in terms of research. And then when this research is carried out, they give so much inputs to it, but they do not get any benefit from it because it just becomes a standalone project for the individual who then takes it as a project that has been completed. So the logic was we should push a bit more towards that. And I think there was issues about water, because we agreed in the panel that water is probably our biggest challenge when it comes to climate. In particular, looking at the status of drought, now that we're experiencing one of the worst droughts in like 100 years. And so water harvesting, water literacy, water scarcity education, like there was a lot of emphasis around strengthening the water agenda for Namibia, especially in places like Windhoek that depend a lot on banked water, underground water recharges. And when it doesn't rain, a lot of this stressing also then exacerbates people's sustainability, businesses as well. We see a lot of like car washes and stuff getting closed down. And the logic was to argue that we need to move away from demand side management towards automated management, where we don't need to always go and close the taps. But when it's time for emergency, people are aware of how to ration the water, so that way the state reduces the cost of adapting to drought, but actually enhances the capacity of people to be able to use water in such a way that we don't always have to remind them that we're actually a water stress country. So that was one big takeaway that I saw. And there was also a lot about community engagement, looking at poverty eradication, how we can be a bit more practical with our work, especially considering our NILALEG is a project that is very broad. It's supposed to focus from poverty eradication to landscape management, especially in rural settings where people are largely threatened with land degradation, for example. And the logic then again was, how do we make it so that the projects speak to people's daily lives and livelihoods, so that they do not become research opportunities rather than actually changing people's lives meaningfully? And those were some of the issues that my panel raised, and they also raised about governance. They were very much worried about the lack of mandate when it comes to climate, because to act on climate, especially from a disaster risk reduction perspective, it's very important that the power structures are able to act in accordance to the needs on the ground. And this was raised in particular with climate, that the Ministry of Environment, for example, as a focal point on climate, felt that they could do with a little bit more help to elevate this issue outside of just a ministry-to-ministry conversation, so that we could have higher mandate authority that comes, so we can deploy resources immediately. Because Ministry of Environment itself feels like they alone are not enough to talk to other ministries. But if we could get support from other higher institutions like Office of the President, Office of the Prime Minister, we've got a committee in Namibia, intergovernmental committee, however, it's just ministerial. And so we still are lacking that power that can move things. So those were some of the discussions my panel undertook.
Fantastic. And then, Dion, if you had the ear of every Namibian, what would you want them to know about why this matters?
Personally, I would like to remind Namibians that Namibia is a country that is very much deep tied to the environment. And a large part of our identity as a nation largely depends on how we manage our environment. Meaning our economy depends largely on the environment, where we have up to 60-70% of our people directly dependent on the environment, whether it's through crop or livestock management. And so that means if we as Namibians actually neglect our responsibility towards the environment, we have a very, very big risk of finding ourselves in challenges that are completely outside of our socially constructed challenges that we are so obsessed with that we have forgotten our geographic and biological vulnerabilities. And therefore, it's mandatory for every Namibian to ask themselves, where does my water come from? Where will it come from? How many years from now? How is my energy produced? And what is the cost of that energy? And finally, food security is also one element that we need to link to the environment. So I'd like to say that Namibians need to become more obsessed and more curious about how our environment is being affected by climate and how we would look like as a country years from now. How will our tourism be impacted? And our traditional rural settings are also going under stresses. So for me, I'd like to think that Namibians must know that we are very, very vulnerable to climate, but also desertification and many things. And it's so important. I would like to think that all of us take at least one day to understand those core elements of our water security, our food security, our energy security, and our environmental sustainability, so that we are able to depend on it for years to come.
We attended this conference to find out if participants felt the same way. Here is Innocent Hangura from GIZ sharing his view on the conference.
I think the conference is a great initiative, especially when you look at, from what I understand, is the main objective of the conference, which is really to bring various stakeholders, academia, industry, government, private sector, around this issue of sustainable land management. I think the idea is great, it's brilliant, and I think it's long overdue.
Many expressed a desire to share the insights and discoveries from the event with a broader audience across Namibia. Mobita Chaka, a community member and representative from the National Forestry Research Centre, explains what he felt really stood out for him and where focus needs to be placed.
Dissemination of information is quite important. I think that aspect was brought up there, that the information is not trickling down into the society on the ground, the people who are actually really affected by these particular changes in the landscape. Yes, so that information is not only for the researchers, it is actually supposed to be disseminated to the communities on the ground and implemented. Yes, by the way, we are from the communities, so we're actually supposed to live the way we talk. So that's how it's supposed to be.
And Innocent from GIZ added to these sentiments.
I think right now we need to see how we can help affected communities to adapt. I think that's the urgent issue here. Certainly degradation is evident, especially in most parts of the Northwest, where communities are already feeling the effects. And if we can get, let me say, short and medium-term solutions to this, that will really assist people.
Salit Hangome, who is part of the Nilaleg team, shared what really stood out for her at this conference.
I think we have uncovered two really important things that really came out. Is first of all the disintegration in terms of planning at national level for government, not only planning at the government ministry but at policy level, because we find different policies from different sectors that all have a part to play in terms of integrated landscape management, but their policies are so disintegrated. So that is the one thing that has been uncovered really here. And then also the second part is we have so many policies, strategies, scientific research, but these things are only on paper. They are not actually being implemented on the ground. So that really came out strongly to say we need to do better as government, as stakeholders, to say when we have these things put in place, especially the scientific research, that in most cases have evidence of good practices, that we need to trickle this down and really garner support for this to be implemented on the ground so we are able to see those results on the ground.
The conference saw a wide range of attendees, from government, community members, non-governmental organizations to students. Abed Itai, a student at Oshigambo High School, had this to say.
with this conference, we can actually use what we are getting from the conference, and when we implement it, it will actually contribute to Namibia's development.
Effective land management strategies are essential to mitigate degradation and promote sustainable land use. Addressing land degradation requires a multifaceted approach that combines scientific knowledge with practical management strategies. By adopting sustainable practices and policies, we can restore degraded lands, enhance productivity, and preserve ecosystems for future generations. The Nila Lake Project and the Integrated Landscape Management Conference are a testament to Namibia's dedication to sustainable development. By fostering collaboration, innovation, and informed decision-making, Namibia is not only addressing its environmental challenges, but also uplifting livelihoods across its landscapes.